Episode 5, Captured. We start off the episode by meeting a new character. His name is Krim. He's a smooth-talking heavy spear who essentially just enjoys making friends and playing the game. It's about now that I want to talk about character archetypes and what they mean for our interpretation of the show. I'm sure I've mentioned that one of my fascinations about .hack Sign is that the characters all represent very realistic interpretations for people who play MMOs. They all use the world as a means of escapism, but what that means for each player differs. Krim, for example, has a very simplistic view of the world. Simply put, it is a video game, and he uses it to blow off steam from work. I'm sure this is a very common and, quite frankly, uninteresting reason for most gamers. What makes his reasons a bit more interesting will come later in the show, but he does represent a very specific archetype. If I could put a word to describe Krim, it would be superficial. He takes video games about as seriously as he can spare. Of all the cast, he is the one who is the most unattached to the world, and would just consider it a hobby at best. Again, more on that later. But then we hit the other extreme that we know about, which is Tsukasa. If Krim is the most casual example of escapism, then Tsukasa is the polar opposite, where he quite literally uses the world as a new home and has completely left the real world behind. Which gives us this interaction between the two. Krim offers help because that's essentially what you do in an MMO. But unfortunately, he accidentally insults Tsukasa by saying his face doesn't look normal. These two not getting along makes a whole lot of sense. If there's anyone who Tsukasa hates, it is adults who lie or speak selfishly. And while I wouldn't call Krim a liar, he can certainly come off as ingenuine, especially to someone like Tsukasa, who makes very swift judgments of other people. Good try, Krim. Next we see Mimiru and Bear talking about Tsukasa's bounty. It strikes Mimiru as strange that a player in a video game is now wanted, and she's not wrong. There are a lot of things that are strange about a player being witch hunted in a video game. Bear tries to justify it by saying that Tsukasa broke the rules, but even he knows that's not the same thing. See, when you break the rules in an MMO, you get suspended or banned. A video game company usually can never do anything that directly affects your actual life, and it is nowhere near normal for players to essentially block someone from playing the game. It's the same idea of the last episode when I spoke about Subaru questioning if she even had the authority to seize someone's player information. Mimiru is also skeptical, though she is obviously more empathetic to Tsukasa's situation, seeing as she actually knows him. Bear, being the more parental figure, knows that even if it feels a bit wrong, that something has to be done about Tsukasa, especially considering his suspicion that Tsukasa's real body is in a hospital. On the more gung-ho side of things, Silver Knight tells Subaru that while they have no leads on Tsukasa's whereabouts, he is sure that if things quiet down, Tsukasa will make a move. Which is a subtle way of saying that eventually Tsukasa will attack another player, and when that happens, he'll be ready. Subaru obviously doesn't want to use other players as bait, but leaves because she has received a message from an old friend. In the meantime, BT calls a meeting with Sora to offer some information about how to find Tsukasa. Now, BT has had very little to do in the first 4 episodes, but she is most certainly the most cunning of all the cast, next to Sora. She has a plan to lure out Tsukasa, but she needs Sora's connection to the Crimson Knights to get it done. Personally, I love the dialogue in this scene. BT starts off by conceding that she has no chance in a 1v1 fight with Sora, which she is right. She says that she wants to exchange information, which implies that they both have something that the other wants. Sora throws that idea in her face, forcing her to offer the information for free. She does, of course, knowing that Sora will do what she wants anyways, because in the end, they both want the same thing, the key of the Twilight. And they both know that the only way to get close to the answer is to capture Tsukasa. You see this kind of dialogue in political dramas like House of Cards or Game of Thrones. You always want to be arguing from a place of superiority, because if your opponent knows that they have something over you, they will be able to get more out of you than you can of them. In this case, Sora has connections with the Crimson Knights, who have the ability to capture Tsukasa, and restrain his ability to teleport. BT, on the other hand, has the means to lure Tsukasa out, by the way of the people close to him. Meanwhile, Krim meets with Subaru. Turns out they are old friends from when the Crimson Knights was formed. Now, I don't want to give the impression that I think Krim is an asshole just because I called him superficial last time I brought him up. He's actually a very helpful, fun character. He's just not as emotionally invested as any of the other characters in the show. It makes sense when you think about it in that context. Krim shows up after having left the world and basically ditched Subaru with the responsibility of the Crimson Knights that he was a founding member of. She just kind of stares blankly at him as if to say, "Really? After all this time, that's what you have to say to me?" That being said, his blatant positivity gets the better of her, and she is, in the end, relieved that he hasn't changed at all. They reminisce about the Crimson Knights a bit, and she tells him to check the board to find out what's been going on because he doesn't keep up with it. Finally, we get back to Tsukasa. Here we foreshadow a bit of Tsukasa's insecurities. He complains that the Guardian didn't obey his commands, but reels back at the thought of Morgana giving the power to other people. He likes having the power, and he likes feeling special, which is an understandable line of thought considering his past. Back with Subaru, she meets up with Sora, who informs her of his plan to lure out Tsukasa. She declines, seeming to have decided to reevaluate the situation, but it seems like Silver Knight, strangely enough, wants to actually hear Sora out. The plan is for BT to tell Tsukasa, through Mimiru, about another player who has a Guardian following him. The idea is that when Tsukasa hears that someone else has his power, he will want to meet with him. That is the reason BT and Sora are the most cunning characters in the show. They know without a doubt that the plan is going to work. Both of them have a very keen understanding of the psychology of someone who wants to feel special, and have the ambition to back it up. Tsukasa takes the bait, and before Bear and Mimiru can realize it, he is surrounded by the Crimson Knights. He's not shaken though. Before getting surrounded, he sent a message to Mimiru saying, to hold one's heart strong. He was told that the reason he couldn't control the Guardian was because he was weak. He's prepared to fight. And with that, we get the second of the very few action scenes in the show. The Crimson Knights are no match for the Guardian, and Tsukasa lets his hubris get the better of him, not using the opportunity to leave the area. Subaru appears, stating that she never authorized this attack. The Guardian attacks her, and she is saved by one of her knights, who gets data drained to everyone's horror, except Tsukasa, who merely grins. Krim shows up on a super sick grunty and knocks down Tsukasa, who is swiftly spirited away by the knights. And the episode ends with Tsukasa being imprisoned, screaming to be let go. So before I end the video, I want to talk about something I brought up last episode. I had an infographic about a character in Season 2 of Sword Art Online called Red Eyes Zaza, or Death Gun, the primary villain of the Gun Gale Online arc. He was part of Laughing Coffin, a famous Red Guild in Seo, that Kirito had to take down and arrest. Now this would be fine in Seo because everyone is in the same boat. Everyone can die in Seo, so it's effectively a new world and the players need to police themselves. The problem is that unless this was specified in the books, which even if it was, I wouldn't give a fuck, after Seo was beaten, we never hear about any red players being put in jail. Specifically Zaza, who we know eventually becomes Death Gun and goes on to murder more people in Gun Gale Online. See, in this case, Seo didn't even realize the legal ramifications of a real-world crime happening in the video game. So I can assume all the murderers got out and no one ever paid for it. That is a plot hole, and one of the many reasons why SAO sucks. .hack says different, as long as you're paying attention. See, I want to anchor us to reality, because .hack, unlike other shows, is set in a modern world with our rules and laws. It's not space, it's not the Old West, and it most certainly isn't a fantasy world. I do this because it can be easy to get lost in the fiction and not realize when something fundamentally wrong happens right in front of you. Tsukasa is now a prisoner in a video game. I mean, he always was, but not like he is now. He was just kidnapped by people who have no legal authority to hold him in custody. These are not knights, these are not cops. Tsukasa was not read his rights, he was not charged with a crime, and he does not have a lawyer. Subaru realizes it, as you can tell by the look on her face when Tsukasa was on the ground, telling himself that it's all a dream. Now it can be argued that Tsukasa has to be stopped because he was hurting people with his guardian, and that is true, but that's also not how the law works. And that is because virtual worlds by and large do not follow the laws of the real world, because everything that happens in a virtual world would be considered inconsequential. However, because Tsukasa is trapped here, everything that happens to him from now on becomes consequential.